Good day, everyone. Welcome to our Q&A podcast.
Welcome. We have a proper introduction now again from you, Blake.
Yes.
It's nice to have you back.
I'm excited to be here. I feel like I've missed a couple weeks, and I'm back.
Yeah.
And, if you have moving questions, send them in. I know lots about moving right now in my life, so I can tell you all the things not to do. But
Do you want to ask, have you watched some of the episodes while you've not been here?
I have not.
Okay.
I've heard.
That's
I've
why
been
you're so
out
kind to me
doing
now.
my job, meeting with people, and they'd be like, "Did you hear what Doug and Kyle said about you?" And so I have not. I have not listened.
Fair enough. We did not match intentionally.
But we're looking sharp.
We are. I must
admit.
admit, your beard's coming in nice,
a little
Blake.
bit, yeah.
Winter, got to keep yourself warm. Is that
Well,
the theme?
it was kind of the playoff thing, right? Like
Yeah.
I like having reasons to grow a beard, and
Yeah.
now that we're not in a house, we're just kind of officially drifting.
Yeah.
Well, we're living on my mom and dad's farm, but I thought I would grow the beard until we moved into our new house. That was
Fair
my
enough.
thought a couple of weeks ago. So we'll see how long it gets in a month here.
Cool. Very cool. Awesome. We're a lot nicer. It must be Doug that poisons me and makes me be so mean to you.
There, okay.
We'll see if he listens now.
Yeah, let's see if he's listening.
Cool. Let's jump into the questions.
All right.
I'll let you take your host role.
Okay, I'll read, and then you have to answer. That's the
Oh,
perfect way to
shoot.
do it.
Yeah, I didn't think of that part. Oopsies.
All right, so this is our question that we'll start with. Not that I don't agree with working for the kingdom, but on some levels, I'm really not a fan of the Bible book of James. In fact, I wonder if James is the only part of the canon because he is Jesus' brother. He didn't seem to espouse Jesus' teaching until after, and then he writes a book that just implements legalism right back into the teachings. Am I totally off base?
I love the question. You are probably not alone in your doubts of James. Martin Luther, was it Luther? Luther, yes. Luther wanted to remove James and Revelation, a couple other books from the Bible, because I think James, I haven't done a ton of reading on it, but I would guess the reason why Luther wanted to remove it is because it's the New Testament book probably most difficult to apply to his saved by faith alone portion.
Yep.
And I guess I'll speak to the theological end of James there, to the part of works or legalism, the way you phrase it, before we get into the James' relationship to Jesus, because I think that's actually a strength, not a weakness. But I'll say with the book of James hurts. I'll say it that way. To join in with you that I have definitely been frustrated with the book of James because it doesn't let me be comfortable. I have had definitely frustrations with the book and great love for the book for the exact same reasons that it doesn't let me sit still. I think there is a lot of truth to the fact that we are saved by faith alone. Trying to say this carefully, but I don't think we have faith if we don't do what James talks about. And I think this is what James makes the point of. You can say you have faith all day long. The Greek word for faith, pistis, the faithfulness displayed in the word pistis has nothing to do with belief and everything to do with action. And so unless we have action, I think James would argue, and I'd be right there with them, unless you have action, you don't actually have faith. So you can't be saved by something you don't have. And so I think James is saying, and this is something I've tried to explain before, and I haven't fully worked out how to say it succinctly, so bear with me as I probably ramble a little bit. I think there's times in my life where my heart leads what my actions do, but I also think there's times in my life where I've seen for sure that my actions then lead where my heart will be. Yeah. Where I will put my hands to doing what I want to do and where I want to be and becoming the person that Christ wants me to be. And I have to step into action first and my heart comes second. And I don't think there's a one or the other how that always works. I've seen that go back and forth. And so I will say, I would go so far as to say, I don't think if we have our actions lining up with our faith in Christ, I don't think we actually have faith the way the New Testament calls it into question. So I wouldn't say James is talking about legalism. I think James' book is a safeguard to us thinking we have faith and being completely fooled by that matter. I think Jesus' words and James's words line up a lot closer in how he applies them than sometimes our understanding of Paul's words do. And I think sometimes just leaning on Paul alone in the New Testament, I don't say I have anything against Paul, but Paul only, I think, can be sometimes leading us into a dangerous camp of thinking our faith is what saves us just in belief and thought and not in action.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
That's all good, and I'll just keep adding. Because this is a topic that I really like. I love the book of James.
Yeah.
Not because it's easy in any way. In fact, my brother makes me laugh. One of my brothers, Mark, all the time. He's the kind of guy that you would ask for help.
Yeah.
I would ask for help. Hey, Mark, can you come help me with this? He's like, no, never want to help do anything. You're always asking me. I got stuff to do. He's like, but I know that's what Jesus would want me to do.
Yeah.
And then he'll show up and help me, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's the right heart. I sometimes question that with my brother, and we laugh about it and have good conversations. But that's him believing there has to be faith in action.
Yeah.
That he cannot just say, I believe in God or I follow Jesus
Yeah.
and not do something about it. He actually has to do something.
Yeah.
I think James, we would believe that he probably was a late adopter
Yep.
to Jesus being the Christ and all that, right?
Yeah.
We don't see any proof in the Gospels of him, following Jesus around. In fact, I think the family might have been a little bit ticked off with Jesus, assuming that, he was all that in a bag of donuts kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think that just adds to the validity of it for me, is that I think from what I've read, James probably wrote this late in his life as well.
Yeah.
So he's lived a lot of life, and now he's kind of writing his last discourse to, hey guys, this is from my experience in my life, this is what you should pay attention to.
Yeah.
I think he's going, this is what Jesus taught.
Yeah.
Right? I think in Matthew's words, we're doing the Sermon on the Mount right now, and at chapter 7 and verse 21, he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord. And there's even proofs there, right? That
Yeah.
doing these miracles, he says, will get into the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more than just surface level
Yeah.
actions.
Yeah.
This is a heart of actually caring for other people. And I think that's what James is.
Yeah.
James is, there has to be more
Yeah.
than just belief or just saying that I'll do good works.
Yeah.
But it actually they have to couple together.
Yeah.
And I think of even, we've mentioned the Patient Ferment many times. I'm still reading that book. And I was reading yesterday, and they was talking about the catechism. So for the first 200 years of the church, or at least the documents they have of certain ones,
Yeah.
they were saying that they don't even introduce the gospel until just before baptism. So they've probably gone a year or two
Yeah.
just learning Old Testament law.
Yeah.
And the whole reason for that is because they were trying to form the habit of the people
Yeah.
before they followed Christ.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a real behavior-based thing is what they were trying to, and did. I mean, the church exploded and grew much.
Yeah.
And their main focus was on habit.
Yeah.
How do you live?
Yeah.
Do you live like Jesus? And I think that's what James is saying.
Yeah. I think James keeps the pendulum from overcorrecting, because I think the Pharisees and the Sadducees at the time were so about doing the right thing that and Jesus calls their hearts out for failing to be there. And I think James then helps correct some of that. Like, you can't just have faith and belief. You got to do something about it.
Yeah.
As well. And so I guess the Sadducees and the Pharisees were doing lots, but they didn't have the right motivation.
Right.
And in our day, I think, especially in, not to, just, I'm painting with broad brushes here, but I think the most extreme versions of Calvinist theology lead to, if I've got the beliefs right, I'm good.
I'm good.
And so those are the two extremes, which I think James helps the canon of the New Testament pull us back towards center. Whereas if we just get stuck in Paul, and I was there for a lot of years, I barely read the Gospels in comparison to Paul. I barely read the other epistles in comparison to Paul. I was more of a Pauline follower than I was a Jesus follower, I think, for a portion of my life. That I think James helps with the canon of the New Testament to pull us towards center. But I'll say, to him being Jesus' brother, I think, and maybe this is me reading too far, I think there was actually some animosity between Jesus and his family, except for maybe even Mary, maybe even including Mary during his ministry. I'm mostly thinking of, I think it's Mark 4, Mark 5, where the people, and the Matthew has the same story later on, where people come and say, hey, Jesus, your family's outside. And Mark accounts that they have come because they're trying to collect him because they think he's gone crazy.
Yeah, they think his off is wrong.
And totally. And so he says to the crowd that's there, who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters? Those who do the work of my Father. Those are my brothers and sisters. Yeah. And so Jesus, in one way, in that moment, is disowning his own family.
Right.
And I think for James, being the brother of Jesus, I think him even having a fraction of belief, let alone a full buy-in, is a huge thing. I will never believe my brothers to be
totally.
as great as they truly are.
Yeah.
Because they're my little brothers, and they don't see me for who I am to some degree because they're my younger brothers. That's the way it is, and Jesus suffers that with his whole town, goes back and can't perform as many miracles there because they don't have belief, because like, isn't this Joseph's son? Like, we know him,
We know
right?
that guy. Yeah.
And so there's that element playing into the fact that James buys in with all of who he is in early church history, holds that James became a big part of the church. His letter here is one small part of what he contributed to the overall church.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he is there, I think, speaks highly to his writing and how much important it must be, not the opposite.
And you're right. We need to put it as a whole.
Yeah.
If you had James alone, I can understand how you could definitely get legalistic.
Yeah.
If you have Paul's writings alone,
Yeah.
you might not ever do anything and just be, pie in the sky, everything's good kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But when you put it all together, and obviously when you take Jesus and the Gospels as well,
Yeah.
then we get a complete way of how to live like Christ.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
So,
Cool. I think we covered that one.
it's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll continue on.
Yeah.
So you might have to help me out with this one because I just read it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't here on the episode that you mentioned. So
Right.
I'll just read it. Sir. If evil is the absence of good, like you mentioned in episode number 211, then do you think there is or is not a literal devil?
If I'm remembering correctly, that was when we were talking about Eden type stuff.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up after, but I believe that's the case because I remember talking at some point somewhat recently about Tov and Ra, which are the Hebrew words for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So I don't know if all evil can be defined in that way, but the word that we've translated evil there on that tree as evil actually is a lack of good, not, I guess, offensive, like on the offensive evil.
Right.
I don't know that I would say that all evil is simply the lack of good, but all lack of good is evil. I could put it that way.
Yeah.
I think the lack of good that's being talked about in the knowledge of good and evil that's represented in the tree, I think is leaning towards us following the way of God, leading to fruitful lives, leads to good, Tov, and Ra, a lack of goodness if we don't follow his ways. And so, and that applies more than just morality. I think that would apply to how we, agricultural and family and all those many different pieces, even trade and business, can be done with Tov or with Ra. So I may caveat myself, and if I said something other, I might say that the lack of good is evil, but not all evil is just a lack of something, in the same way that darkness is simply the lack of light. Maybe it is, but I see there's sometimes, I'm just thinking of actions of somebody going to murder somebody else, or any kind of sexual abuse towards anybody, but especially like children. I was listening to a podcast about sex trafficking for children in the Philippines recently, and that's prevalently in my mind. That's not just lack of good, that's like a searching and a pursuit of wrong in my head. And so maybe there's not a word, I don't know Hebrew well enough to start jumping on that, but I'll caveat the whole beginning of my conversation by saying I don't think all evil is just a lack of good. That I think there is choice to pursue evil. I'll stop there, and then I'll jump into the literalness of the devil if you want to add anything.
No, I don't know what you guys said there.
Right.
And I wouldn't think that you were, I like what you just said. I don't think you were giving an absolute, this is the way it is. I can totally understand a Genesis thought process. And even a future heaven, like we think of, I think I've heard that, and my theology would probably land there, where like the goodness of heaven is because God is there, right? Like that is the presence of God, and anything, however you would describe a hell or think of a hell, it doesn't matter what your theology there is. I think you would land in the camp of saying that is an absence of God, right?
Totally.
So I can understand that, if that's what you guys said in that episode. And then, but I think that's a different, I think that's separate from saying, is there a literal devil? And I'll let you jump on that.
I will say I lean towards the fact that there is a literal devil, but I don't think it's a necessary belief for Christians to hold, is how I'll start that. First, just saying, I think the definition of Christian is found in the Apostles' Creed. There's nothing about a personal Satan in the Apostles' Creed. So therefore, you can be a Christian and not believe in a literal devil. Where I will say why I think there is, mostly comes down to Jesus' interaction and his temptation with the devil. That he seems to have that's recorded for us multiple times for us to deal with Jesus having encountered and dealt with the temptation directly from a personal presence of the devil. So you could write that off as other things. I'm sure he was at the end of a 40-day fast. Maybe he's hallucinating and personifying something. I think there's I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I just don't see that. I'm convinced by Jesus seems to say that was a case. Jesus warns of it, and Paul is really concerned about principalities and all those pieces, where I would lean towards believing there's a literal devil. But I will say this then in support of the other side, and I think it's a case, I just don't think it's the strongest case for me to not believe it. First, starting with the Old Testament, there is no devil in the way the New Testament deals with it in the Old Testament. The Satan in Job, which quickly people may be thinking of, there's the Satan in Job. That is not Satan in the New Testament sense of the word. The Satan in Job is a office. It's a role that can be filled by a person of some kind, the same way you may have a senator or something like that, like an official authoritative office. That's what the Satan was in the Old Testament. It was, and better translated, the accuser. And that person, I'm using the person term to define somebody with autonomy and all those pieces. The person that fills that role would play similar to what the Catholic Church has now in big debates, and a role we would all be familiar with in the devil's advocate. Somebody to play the other side. And that's the role we see the Satan, the accuser, play in the book of Job. Other than the book of Job, there is no personified personhood representing evil in the Old Testament. The serpent would be the closest other thing, but again, I don't think you can make a case that there's a personal Satan based off the serpent. We could get into that if we wanted, but the strongest case is Job, and I don't think that's much of a case.
I'll jump in there because I'm curious.
Yeah.
I would wonder what an Old Testament view of Satan or the devil would be without the New Testament. Yeah. Like when did that change? Like, is there a shift in history? And I'm asking the question because I don't know. Yeah. Is there a shift in history where because of Jesus, saying he interacted with the devil or saying that he saw, Satan fall from heaven, right? Yeah. Those things then help us go back. Is it Ezekiel that speaks of, or is it which prophet has the falling of Satan from heaven? I
want to say that's Ezekiel as
I think that's Ezekiel. Yeah. And I don't think you would read that way without Jesus saying that. That's my assumption anyways, is I think that probably got credibility as referencing Satan or the devil after Jesus said that he saw him fall from heaven, right? Yeah. That's my guess anyways.
Yeah, the idea of the sides, I guess for lack of a better term, of good and evil that we see in the New Testament, and demonic possession and all of that's foreign to the Old Testament. Yeah. Some of the scholarship I've read and listened to, all those pieces on when that change happened, seems to be the thought was implanted and wrestled with and talked out largely in their Babylonian captivity and then through those years of silence. Okay. And so it wouldn't make it into our canon necessarily. Maybe little bits of it are happening in the latter prophets, but not much of it at all. And that's where maybe it fits with Ezekiel a little bit, where he's starting to wrestle with these concepts and ideas. But in the earlier parts of our Old Testament canon, there is no concept like that. Yeah. There's a concept of spiritual beings and deities, but not based down to this evil and good side of camps and armies and battles and all those pieces of the way that we understand it.
Well, even to take that further or include that, the whole concept of heaven and hell was not really a thing in the early scriptures, right?
Yeah, Old Testament has Sheol, which often gets translated hell in our Bibles, but it's simply the place of the dead where everybody goes. Right. That's even Jesus' parable of Lazarus and the rich man. Yeah. Right? They go to Sheol, the general place of the dead, not evil, not good. Probably more similar to the concept of purgatory that people understand now, and that's where I go. Also, if you want to submit a fishing for questions now,
Yeah.
I think that's where the Catholics have some validation on the concept of purgatory based on Sheol.
Yeah.
That's totally begging for a question, but so I don't think it's necessary that a Christian believe in a literal devil, because I don't think that was a concept introduced throughout the whole of the Old Testament. People seem to be able to be faithful to God through there, yet Jesus interacts with that idea, Paul interacts with that idea, James interacts with that idea. All of them, I think, and this is tying back to last week, due to some of the wrestlings through the book of Enoch, which again was probably written in that silent period between the Old and New Testament. And so was that introduced through the Babylonian influence or other or whatever? But it's not a concept that I think hinges for Christians to have to believe in. I lean that there's a literal devil, but I don't think it's necessary to believe.
Yeah, I think when you say it like that, Kyle, like, maybe I won't call you a heretic, because I would say, yeah, I could get behind that. Like, I don't think that could you be saved, could you follow Christ, could you enter into, a future kingdom of heaven without believing in the devil? According to what I read in Scripture, I would say yes. I don't think that would stop you at all.
Yeah.
But then I would line up with you when I read the New Testament. The way I've been taught to read my Bible, and the way that I will continue to read it until someone tells me different or can convince me different, is I think it's written very literal. Like, I think it's simple. I shouldn't have to cross-reference it or know a different language or have to have someone explain all this stuff to me.
Right.
I think if Jesus says that he saw Satan fall from heaven,
He
wasn't just like waxing poetically.
Right.
He was saying he saw somebody fall from heaven,
Right.
right? And when he says he has an encounter with the devil, for 40 days or whatever, at the end of his fasting and temptation, I go, that's what's written, so that's what I'll believe.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's simple. I understand that's really simple, and the depth of Scripture is massive, and you can keep going.
Yeah.
But I think from a simple level, why do we have to debate something if it's
Right.
just there, right?
Yeah. I might disagree on those Jesus seeing Satan fall from heaven part, but that's where I go with the desert one, right? With the temptation. I see that there. But I do think, both Old and New Testament, they had a concept of a spiritual realm that is interacting and influencing our world as well. I think that's both Old and New Testament. I don't think you can escape that.
Nope, I agree with that.
That belief was there. And I don't want to also say that we can just write it off to those spiritual beings and us are entirely separate worlds either. And I think that's what Paul's wrestling to with the principalities and stuff like that. I think the references to antichrists in the New Testament aren't just some one individual being. I think that's anybody who's opposed to the work of Christ. So I think evil is personified, yes, in certain people in great and drastic ways. I think it can be in a spiritual person as well, like a Satan. But I also think each one of us can personify evil too in our actions. I think that's a wrestle too that goes on in the New Testament, but I could blab on about that for a while.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, as far as needing a devil, I don't need a devil. I can live a very sinful life without ever considering whether the devil is real or not, right? My own self can get me into a lot of trouble.
Totally.
But yeah, I look at the New Testament. I think demonic stuff. I think of the exorcisms that they did, or deliverance, or whatever you want to call it. Jesus casting out demons, his disciples doing that. I think I can get myself into a lot of trouble, but there's definitely passages in Scripture that tell me to put on the armor of God and to pray against, spiritual forces and all those things.
Yeah.
So whether there's a literal devil or whether there's just some sort of evil that exists there, we are instructed in Scripture to be aware
Totally.
and to hold strong, to stand fast against it.
Yeah.
And then to take it a step further then, which I talk about in soul care sometimes, is then they don't give us any detail about it.
Yeah.
So it must not, I don't have to lose sleep
Yeah.
about, the devil and all these evil things, because the Bible doesn't instruct me to at all.
Yeah.
It says it's there,
Yeah.
pray against it,
Yeah.
be aware,
Yeah.
we're good,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'd land on that.
Which I'll throw that quickly back. I know you weren't here last week, but I'll say that's where I think the book of Enoch too really reigns important and valuable, because it gives us some of these ways that Jesus would talk about and not have to say much, because people had their imaginations and how they understood the world had been captured by other pieces of literature like the Book of Enoch. This is how the world works. So we cast out demons. I know what you mean by that, and all those pieces. That I think sometimes does go unknown to us because of who Jesus was talking to.
Right.
But I don't think we also need to. You don't have to have read the Book of Enoch in order to be able to deal with that. So it's in between. But yeah.
Cool.
I'd love a question on Antichrist stuff, but I'm not going to submit one myself. So somebody should submit one.
All right, well, we beat that one down a little bit, which is good. I like it. All right, a simple question, I think.
Yeah.
I am curious as to how our church plans to deal with vaccine passports.
Yeah.
Vaccination passports.
Yeah, this one did come in a while ago, so I'm sorry for the delay. It's just we've just got a backlog, and we try not to favor one question over the other, so we've just kind of left the order they come in. So I know this probably was most relevant right after the vaccine exemption program was announced here. I'll call it that because I get what it's called, but we all know it's vaccine passports.
Yeah.
Without stepping into personal views and all those pieces, I will just answer the question as it's asked. Our church will not be dealing with vaccination passports, as that's not something that's applied to churches. The government sees this as something, places of worship and people being able to express worship and gather together is important enough that they didn't even allow churches to wrestle with that question or not, because they want everybody to be able to access it. I think they saw the debates that would come with it, and so they just said, nope, we're going to put restrictions on numbers, spacing, and masks for churches, and that's how it is. There's no option to wrestle with it for places of worship, so we won't be.
I would say at this point, we have been trusting our government and health officials to keep us safe.
Yep.
And so we have followed the restrictions as they've put them forward.
Yep.
I would assume that we will stay doing that until a magical time, if that ever happens, and I will say it like that because I don't know that it will. I'm not worried about it in any way.
Yeah.
But if they ever told us we could not follow Jesus,
Yep.
then we might have to take a stand as a church and decide what we would do.
Totally.
Until that time, I think we will follow the health officials that are in place because we voted them there and trust them to do their jobs.
I'll say pastorally, I think we want to, whatever our personal views are, and I'm sure those probably have come out in different ways throughout this podcast, especially where we each stand individually. We know, and I know you would have them too, I've got people that I love and care about who land on the opposite side of this discussion, who we want to be able to be together as a church. I think our ability to be united, no matter what we see politically or theologically or otherwise, is one of the greatest lights the church has to shine into this world, especially in a moment like this, where the world is so divided. For us to be able to disagree and love one another, I think is important. And so I think no matter what could possibly, hypothetically, come down the road one day, our focus will be to keep united and be able to serve and gather in some way, well, maybe not gather, to be able to bring together our church in some capacity wherever you land in this debate, because we are the church, vaccinated or unvaccinated, but we will comply with people's health, we'll comply with what the government's putting in and all those pieces until, they ask us to not worship Jesus. Then I've got a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, and I liked how you changed the word gathering, because gathering restrictions are a real thing.
Yeah.
But we even talked this morning at our staff meeting, how do we keep people connected? That still is one of our goals, and I don't know that we have great answers. We're praying hard, because that is something that COVID has done for sure, is made people disconnected. And especially as a church, how do we keep people from feeling lonely or isolated or all those things? How do we continue to be the body of Christ? We will keep wrestling with that the best that we can.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for your patience with us as we do it.
Absolutely. All right, next one. Love listening to the podcast. I'm an out-of-town listener and enjoy weekly. My question is this: do you think the modern church as it exists now will last 5 to 10 years? Or will it eventually be an online, or will it be online in the way our current world is or going? Where is the church going since the advent of social media?
Great question. I will say before I even touch the question, I love that we have an out-of-town listener sending in questions. I would love to hear from you myself. So if you want to send an email or something like that, I'd love to just connect with you. Like, this is such a foreign thing to us. We started this 200 and something episodes ago for our church with the knowledge that there's probably some people wrestling with things the way our church is, and so we'd love to be able to do something for them, and to see that is taking traction outside of our church walls. is awesome. So if you want to connect, like, please reach out.
Yeah.
You can email me, Kyle at livingspringsairdrie.com. Really just all of our names at livingspringsairdrie.com.
You'll get one of us.
And on our website, you'll find ways to contact us. If you're interested, we'd love to hear from you. As for the question, I think the modern church is going to be hemorrhaging people for the next 25 to 30 years. Maybe even longer, depending on how stubborn we choose to be. As the church exists now, what in my view is going to happen is smaller churches are going to continue to close their doors, and mega churches or large churches in areas are going to continue to grow, taking the people that are still wanting to go to a church the way it exists now. They will go to the biggest one that's available to them until probably the closest example would be like when a Walmart moves into a small town and all the local shops close. I think that's probably going to be what it looks like for churches. So some churches are going to have the illusion of growth for the next while, probably the next 5 to 10 years, no problem, while smaller churches close as it exists. I really think the church is in a moment of having the ability and the option and the privilege to be able to rewire itself, re-envision itself, humble itself, and grow and see growth from that. Unfortunately, people are a part of that process, and we are stubborn and we like the things we like. So I imagine that's going to stretch out longer than it probably needs to in order for us to really catch on to reimagining things. I have loved being at this church and getting to be a part of the process, and not to toot our own horn. I really want to keep humility on the table, but I love that we've been willing to wrestle with the fact that just because we did it one way for 500 years does not mean we need to do it. Asking questions of what is fruitful, what is bringing real growth, what is helping people become more like Jesus. And the model of church that we inherited and had till right before COVID, we are feeling does not work best. To answer the in-person question, I think the church, Jesus has promised that will never die. It will be here. I don't, this is probably going to get me into real hot water. I don't know if you can say church is a church when it goes all online. Just going to say that. Maybe that it can't be, but it's a lot of stinking work because church is community and relationship, and I have yet to see real good deep relationship go online. And maybe that's showing my age because maybe people younger than me, some Gen X or Gen Zers are out there going, all my best friends are online, and so maybe that's a real community you feel, and that's awesome. And I maybe I'm just already a dinosaur at 31 years old. I just can't imagine that of how to walk that out. But I do not think church can fully go online because I don't think church exists online to the largest degree. I'll stop there. I'm sure I'll have more to say, but I'll give you a chance to let my rant end.
Yeah, I feel like the question could be answered in a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
As far as social media being added to the church, I think if people are wise and use it well, yes, of course that'll change church. And COVID did it in a massive way. I think a lot of church people would say we were probably behind the times as far as technology and social media went by a good probably 20 years.
Yeah.
COVID hit, and now the churches who have had the ability, because not every church has been able to do this, but churches have made this big shift to go online, which has probably brought us closer to present in the way technology and social media works, which can be a really good thing because I think as much as you might be a dinosaur, I'm a young guy and I'm hip and all the rest. I do think that there is a connectivity that has happened because of social media that had it not been there, COVID times would have been very trying for anybody trying to stay connected. So there is that there. Then I can answer the question more so just on what I believe church will look like going forward. Very interesting to me was a conversation, I didn't get to hear the whole conversation on the radio yesterday, but it was just a phone-in show, and someone phoned in and said, hey, like, as a society, we're in trouble. Like, there's signs of us going downhill. And I've heard this many times. I've read some books about it. But, kind of this 200-year peak that modern civilizations ever since Rome have done.
Yeah.
They build and they conquer and they do all this great stuff,
Yeah.
and then there's just nothing else to do, and they turn inward and they get individualistic, and then they are easily conquered by another country or whatever is typically how it's gone in history.
Yeah.
We're in a different place in history now where we have boundary lines, like the whole world is conquered.
Yeah.
So I don't know that anybody's coming to Canada to take over anytime soon.
Right.
But there is still, I think, North America for sure, and that's what this caller was saying, this opportunity that we need to be paying attention to, because we've been a nation, like the United States for sure has been over 200 years now.
Yeah.
How do we survive, right? And so going to my church question, I've thought this about church for a long time, and then when I link it and go, church and culture are so intertwined in our Western culture for sure, that if our Western culture starts to fall off and disintegrate and have fractures and all the rest, the church is just going to follow along with it. I think that's just how humans operate. I don't know that it's going to happen in 5 to 10 years, but I do feel right now this whole issue of COVID is so polarizing. It is causing a massive division between people with an opinion on this side and an opinion on that side. And I think that is a cost that is going to hurt churches. Because you're going to have some churches that will go with people on this side, and you're going to have churches that will go with people on the other side. And then, you know, if churches aren't unified already, they're going to be divided again, right? I think, you know, big churches, small churches, opinions on every side. But I pray, like you, I think we have really struggled and tried to say, and I hope we're doing it, I hope we're humble and that we are trying to follow Jesus, because that church will never die. And I agree with you. Christ's church will always be. What that looks like in the format of it could be anything.
Totally.
But if people commit to following Jesus, there will always be a church. They will be people following Jesus. And yes, I do not think it is going to look like it does right now 10, 20 years from now.
Phyllis Tickle wrote a book, The Great Awakening, kind of tracing that every 500 years the church has had a reawakening. So we're like 505 years, 504 years right now from Martin Luther nailing his theses to the door. And the thing that has always spurred on great church movements has been people being convinced that they want to follow the ways of Jesus more than anything. And we it's human nature for us to collect a whole bunch of ways and laws of men and practices and traditions and all these pieces that started in good spots
always
and have become now baggage that are holding us from the true thing. And I really think, like anything in every relationship I have, my marriage, we've got to reevaluate regularly of like, hey, we're just doing this for the sake of why let's talk this out. And I think church is just it's this weird relationship between humans and what God is doing. And so the fact that humans are involved, we've picked up a lot of crap that we don't need and need to shake that off once in a while. And I think that is this moment. And so it may get down to 12 people, but you know what? It's been there before. That's where we started, right?
Totally.
If it gets down to 12 people, there's still hope for the church to be the worldwide movement again, because we've been there. So there's nothing to fear in how small that gets, but we need to be pursuing, and this has been our heart, let's be people who pursue being like Jesus, and the rest is extra. The rest is commentary. Let's follow Jesus' words. That's why we've been so passionate about the Sermon on the Mount. That's why I'm so passionate when I talk about, as long as you believe the Apostles' Creed, I'll call you brother in Christ. Let's be about those things, and then showing the love of Jesus. Everything else is commentary.
I agree with you 100%. And I think I learned in biology in high school that when an organism gets comfortable and lazy, they die. When you introduce chaos into any kind of organism or life structure, life thrives. And it goes against every piece of our human nature, because I want to be comfortable and lazy and just lay around and do nothing. I want to do church the way I've done it forever. I want to have everything my way. But every proof of that in life shows that that will just come to an end and we will die.
Yep.
So maybe COVID is the chaos we need to move forward and thrive. I don't know.
Just to be a butt sounds like survival of the fittest, Blake.
Well, it is kind of the way life works to some extent.
I just see this. Oh, I've been fishing for an evolution question for a while.
Nice. We're a long ways in here, so
Yep.
I think we might just call her quits today, you guys,
Okay.
and we will be back with you next week. And send in your questions.
Yeah.
We love them. And have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.